This is you. You worked really hard in school, you got the fancy degree, you landed the impressive job, and you've spent your whole life working your little butt off to be a hardworking, overachieving people pleaser. Your life looks good, but you don't feel good. And it's not like you hate your life, it's not like you have a terrible job, or really that much to complain about. And from the outside looking in, everything looks good. But despite all of that, maybe one day you wake up and you realize that this life that you've worked so hard to build for yourself isn't actually a life that really feels meaningful or fulfilling or purposeful to you. And suddenly you feel really lost in your own life that you've created. If you resonate with any of this, I just want to let you know that you are very much not alone, because that's exactly where I was before I left behind the corporate ladder to move to Hawaii to work on an organic farm. But more on that later. I think for a lot of us, when we find ourselves in this situation where our life looks really good from the outside, but it doesn't feel good on the inside, our first instinct is to feel some type of guilt about this. Because we're like, well, I have this life that so many people would dream of having. Why can't I just be happy with this? Why can't I just feel fulfilled and satisfied and okay with this? Like, who am I to wish this life away? This life that I've been told is what a successful life looks like. And as we deal with these feelings, if you're anything like me, there's going to be some little voice in your head saying, oh, you're so ungrateful for this life that you are so privileged to have. And I think that two things can be true. Yes, it is an amazing privilege to have the resources to get that fancy degree and the support that it required to get there, to land that fancy job, to have a comfortable income. Of course, there's an immense amount of privilege that goes with that. And so I think a lot of us feel that. And when we feel these feelings of like, but this isn't the life I want, we'll shove that into a little corner of our mind and say, no, you're just being ungrateful. You're being selfish for not wanting this thing that so many people would want to have. But if at the end of the day, this life is not making you happy, we can't just keep shoving those feelings away into a box in the corner of our mind. Because you, just like everybody else in the world, deserve to live a happy life, one that feels purposeful and meaningful and fulfilling to you. And if that's not the life that you're living right now, listen to that. I think when a lot of us start to have these thoughts, we feel very alone because nobody talks about this. It feels taboo to complain about this beautiful life that you have. So we don't. We keep it all on the inside. And we might even gaslight ourselves into thinking that these thoughts and these feelings are invalid. They're not warranted because there are so many people out there who have it so much worse off than we do. And so these thoughts shouldn't be taken seriously because we have no right to be unhappy with this life that we're living. Who are we to complain about our fancy degrees and our successful corporate careers, you know? So instead of turning outward and questioning the system that led so many of us to believe that this is the picture of success, you know, the fancy job, the white picket fence, we often turn our thoughts inward and say, well, there's clearly something wrong with me for feeling these complicated feelings. We start to blame ourselves and we end up feeling really alone. But I'm telling you that the more that I talk to people, both in my real life and online, about this kind of thing, the more I realize that we are not alone in feeling this way. You know, this is actually something that a lot of people are experiencing, and we're just holding it all inside. So this is my invitation to have that conversation. Let's talk about it. Because here's the deal. A lot of us were essentially prescribed this idea of what success looks like from a really, really young age, which ultimately means that we're living our lives according to this kind of script that's laid out for us. And this script tells us that if you're a hard worker and a high achiever, this is going to lead to stability. And having that stability is going to lead to fulfillment. That's the story that we're told. This is a system that rewards competence. So when you're like me and you're a high achiever and you're a people pleaser and you chase gold stars and you chase brownie points, You are the perfect subject for this system. And for a while, this feels great. You work your little butt off, you earn those gold stars, and you get the pats on the back and the validation that you're doing good work. Those little dopamine hits fuel your little people-pleasing brain, and you keep going. But with every gold star you earn, it comes at a cost, and this cost, at least for me, was invisible for a long time. But the reality is that for many of us, when we get more and more sucked into this system, this setup, we become less and less in tune with our own thoughts and feelings and emotions, which results in us becoming more and more numb to our own wants, our own needs, our own desires, and our own perception of what feels purposeful and meaningful in life. And we might even start to forget what we like to do for fun and for enjoyment. We push away our hobbies and trade them for those gold stars and those brownie points. And every time we do that, we're losing these little bits of what makes life feel really meaningful for us. And I'm no stranger to this. I've told this story before on this channel, but in high school, I used to call myself an emotionless brick. And I used to joke about it all the time in high school. Like, haha, it's funny, I just don't feel emotions. Lol.
My friends and my family oftentimes describe me as an emotionless brick.
And of course, when I look back on it now, I see what was happening there. And I'm like, that's so sad. But that's exactly what it was, is I was trading my own thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, my wants and my needs for those brownie points and those gold stars. And, you know, this started for me probably before high school, but it continued through a lot of my adult life. I'm 28 years old now, and only just this year did I start to turn this ship around in a different direction. Because yeah, all throughout high school and all throughout college and the years after that, I continued walking down this clearly defined path of success that had just been paved for me since birth, you know? And I'm not saying that this was imposed on me by any particular individuals. Like, my parents were never the type of people to say, like, you must get A's, you must achieve. It's just, you know, I think that I'm the perfect combination of that high achieving, hardworking people pleaser type of person, that I thrived on those gold stars, and so I just kept pursuing them. And I remember that each achievement in my life, each degree, each graduation, each, you know, new job, whatever, when I would look forward into the future, I remember literally visualizing like a big black wall and being like, I don't even know what's on the other side of this thing, because I have no ambition outside of this achievement, like getting this one thing done, the next thing on my checklist of being an overachieving, successful people pleaser, you know? And so that led me through undergrad, and I double majored in undergrad, and then I went on to grad school and got a fancy degree from a fancy Ivy League school. And then I landed a job in corporate consulting, environmental consulting, which is, you know, a career path that a lot of people strive to have. It brings in money, it brings in stability. But then, even on my very first day, when I walked into that office and I looked around at the cubicles, for the first time, when I flashed forward into my life, I saw beyond that black wall, and I saw what a life could look like sitting at those cubicles. And I was like, I am not going to sit here for 40 years in these cubicles. This cannot be my life. And so from that moment, I finally started to listen to these inner thoughts and feelings that I had shoved into that corner. And I started to really come to terms with the fact that this life that I had worked so hard to build, that looked really good, wasn't making me happy. I didn't want this. I didn't want to sit at this cubicle and clickety-clackety my keyboard for 40 years straight. I studied ecology, and I was in my business casual, sitting at my cubicle. And there was one day where you couldn't even see a window from where I was sitting. And so I pulled up a live stream on my third monitor of the outside world. And for me, that was kind of an aha moment where I was like, what am I doing? This is not making me happy. So I started to listen to that. And there's more to my story than what I'll get into here in this video. But my goal and my hope here is just to say that if you are feeling this way, if you're waking up one day like I did and realizing that this life, it's for somebody, it's their dream life. But for me, it's not making me happy. You are not alone. You are not broken, and you're in very good company here. And like I said, after having this conversation with people online and in my real life, I'm now convinced that this is a pretty common thing that a lot of us feel, but we just don't talk about and we just don't acknowledge because it feels taboo and we feel guilty for feeling this way. For a lot of us, if you're anything like me, having this realization kind of feels like going through a second puberty in some ways, because there are all kinds of growing pains and we just have to figure out how to live in this weird new realization that the life we've been living isn't the life that we want to be living. And so how do we get from there to where we want to be? It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. There's going to be painful bits. There's going to be ugly bits. Never ugly. You slay, actually. You're going to look hot the whole time you go through this transition. But you know what I'm saying. And all of that is okay. And it's more than that. Not only is it okay, but it's actually such a beautiful thing to have this realization that the track you're on isn't the track you want to be on, because it allows you to pivot. It allows you to start taking one baby step at a time towards a life that does feel more fulfilling to you. Because the reality is, a lot of people never get there. A lot of people, even if they have that realization, they never take that first step towards doing something different. So if you can have that realization, you can sit with it, you can realize that you're not crazy, you're not ungrateful, you're not alone, and you can take that first step. What a beautiful, beautiful thing that is. It's not bad. It's amazing. And I'm not saying that you have to follow suit and do what I did and leave behind your corporate career and move to an island in the middle of the ocean to go work on an organic farm to realign your life. Everybody is in a different situation in their life. This is going to look different for each one of you, but that's up to you to decide what that first little baby step is going to be. I think step one is doing what you're doing right now by, the fact that you clicked on this video and the fact that you've watched this far is like a monumental step, right? Of just acknowledging that where you are is pointing in a different direction than where you want to be. And screw everybody else's brownie points. Give yourself a brownie point for that. Give yourself a gold star if that's what you need, because what a freaking amazing realization. Your life is going to change when you sit with these feelings and you hold on to them and you validate them and you let them be real, because they are real, okay? They are real, and they're gonna lead you to something amazing. And I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this, because I want you to hear me when I tell you that having this realization, no matter if you're 28 like me, or if you're younger than I am, or if you're older than I am, no matter how much time you've put into this life that you've worked so hard to build that ultimately doesn't make you particularly happy or doesn't feel that fulfilling, that was not wasted time. That was not wasted effort at all. And even if you've put 90 years into this path, it's not a sign that you failed in any way. All it means is that you, right now, where you are in life, you've outgrown this version of success that was once true for you. And you're hitting that second puberty, and you're ready to grow out of that into something different. You're ready to redefine success in a way that feels more aligned with your hopes, your dreams, your values, and your feelings, your emotions. And that's an amazing thing. So my recommendation is just to sit with these feelings for a while. There were several years between when I first started having this realization and when I actually made this big career jump for me to come work on this farm. This is not something that happened overnight. It took like almost a decade, to be honest. I'm not saying it's going to take a decade for you, but what I am saying is just sit with those feelings for a while journal about it, you know. Maybe you're like me, and sometimes I like to just take a video and just talk to the camera about it, even if that video never ends up anywhere. Just process those feelings, validate them, let them be real and out in this world. Unpack that little box in the corner of your mind and let those feelings and those thoughts out, because they are real and they are valid. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need a well-defined corporate exit plan. All you need is just to be honest with yourself about how you're feeling, and then enjoy the waterfall of relief that comes from just doing that. Maybe you're like me, and maybe you also feel like an emotionless brick after years of shoving those feelings away in a little box in the corner of your mind. But I promise you that those feelings are still there. They didn't go anywhere. They didn't disappear. They weren't destroyed. They're there, and they're beautiful, and they're valid. And you are so strong. You are so capable. You have so much to offer this world, and you are not alone if you're feeling any of these things. So if you made it this far into the video, I have to imagine that you must have resonated with at least some part of this. So if you're curious to hear a little bit more about my backstory and how I went from this initial realization of misalignment to this massive pivot in my life that ended up in me being here on this farm in Hawaii, take a look at this video where I'll do a deeper dive into my backstory. So with that, thank you for being here. I love you, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye, everyone.